Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It helped me continue my research into this area that I had been already pursuing. What I'm going to cover today is going to be a lot of information, and I want to start out by, introducing myself to everyone and why I kind of dove into this. And then I thought I'd start with the basic promise of cryptocurrencies, the technology. There's a lot of tech involved, but it's layered as a stack, so we can break it down that way. And then Web3 is on top of that. In some ways, there's a split between the originalists of who believe in Bitcoin versus anyone else who has come along and is doing smart contracts and the applications on top of Ethereum. There's a divide going on there. And then I'll touch on some scams and thefts and like what has led, what are some of the examples and what has led us to that point, and then conclude with summary and conclusions. So first of all, like, who am I? Just to give you a sense of my background and what I brought to this. My work experience is I'm a software engineer by training, and my career has been mostly on managing software development teams in various platforms in different worlds. So TL, too long to don't read. I have deep product development experience with web, high availability backend servers, big data, financial transactions, time series data, and the idea of platform versus protocol, which is one of the underlying themes of the crypto space. I won't go through all of these, but the lessons I've learned at each of my major positions are about big data. I lived through the dot-com bubble creation and bust. Worked on building a developer platform on standard protocols, making trade-offs on high volume transactions in clustered big databases, big data databases, NoSQL databases. And also in the fintech world, the company I was at, we provided a banking app for the underbanked people in Brazil. Real story, we once had a $0 bug, $0 balance bug in the app. And with people with very little money, seeing that their money is gone, or thinking that their money is gone, was a big deal. They threatened to call the police on the store, the retailer that we were partnering with, and they were very upset. And to us, tech guys, that was just a bug. We'll fix the bug. But it really made me realize, wake up, like, oh, these are people's lives, right? It's not just as a Facebook, I can't upload my video or my picture. I'll be able to do it, tomorrow. It's like, I lost my money and I don't have very much money. And so that was a very salient point in that experience, I think. And it has a lot to do with what's going on with, I think, in some aspects of the crypto world. So why am I focusing on crypto? Why have I done this? So last summer I started, I decided to dig in deeper. I started listening to podcasts and learned about DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I wonder where this is going to go. I never really bought into the speculative aspects of investing in Bitcoin to make $1 billion, but I was looking at the tech and what would live past a crypto crash or a bubble burst. So I started forming my own DAO. I never really did finish that effort, but it was going to have all the, its own tokens and everything else. But as I learned more, my .com experience instincts were awakened. So I decided to dig in a little deeper. I was really at the core is the blockchain, and essentially it is a database. It's a different kind of database. It has different features of some other databases that are out there. But I became very curious about that, since that seemed to be at the crux of everything. So this presentation captures my journey to answer these two questions. What would survive a crypto crash, and is blockchain the next evolution of databases? Back to this crypto promise. So what is the promise? So I might have missed some of these, but basically the overall promise of the cryptocurrency world has been that you are anonymous. Your transactions are public, but you yourself are anonymous. There is no personally identifiable information that can be hacked and shared on the dark web, so people can steal your identity. It's better than privacy because the government can't snoop on you. And the Snowden revelations really, kind of gave fuel to that effort to we need to, not only are our government, our companies spying on us with our data and advertising dollars, the government is. Sorry, I was just checking the chat message from Steve. Yep. Decentralized. This is better than centralized, which is how it's the current systems are deemed. Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, all these systems are kind of centralized, and they can become influenced and controlled by government, as we've seen with cases where Facebook is in other countries having to, and Google having to obey the laws that are passed in different authoritarian governments and countries. Because the data is centralized, they can expose people's identities and information to the government. Again, tying back into the anonymous nature of this. Censorship resistant. It's outside regulatory and big tech's reach. It's immutable. You can't change it. Once you put something on the blockchain, it's there. You can't change it without everyone knowing that you've changed it. Can't be secretly done. And of course, after the 2008 financial crash and a whole generation of people kind of who have gone to college and not seeing that promise, seeing the promise of future growth and livelihood being destroyed, creating the lure to create generational wealth and going to the moon has really taken off big. So anonymity is better than privacy. So just to clarify and define what those terms mean. So a transaction, which is the fundamental unit on the blockchain, a transaction is anonymous if no one knows who you are. A transaction is private if what you purchased and for what amount are unknown. And in this 2x2 matrix, Bitcoin is kind of in the lower right-hand column where it's more anonymous, less private. Cash is anonymous and private. Credit cards are less anonymous and less private. Like a public charitable gift is more private and less anonymous. And the promise is that while your blockchain transactions are not private, no one will be able to map your identity to any set of transactions. That's the promise. There are things that have happened that make that less easy to support. Decentralized is better than centralized. And this is where we start to get technical. First of all, we need to update some terminology. So this is a classic, this is from the 1960s, the network topology comparing three sets of network topology. So there is the centralized network where there's one center node and everyone is a hub or a hub and spoke. Everyone's a spoke off of that hub. In the old terminology, decentralized was a few hubs with their own spokes, but the hubs were connected. And then distributed was where everyone's a node on the network can connect to everyone else. That's been changed. The usage of these terms now that I've seen is federated is really the term for the middle structure, and decentralized is really meant to be the distributed model, not the classic one. So that's a bit different. And the bottom graphic shows, kind of illustrates how that kind of works out. And the promise is decentralized, and the new phrasing is always better than centralized and federated. I think everyone agrees that centralized is not ideal. That's the old mainframe model. But the world these days, it kind of oversimplifies thinking that Web 2 is centralized and bad. Web 2 has really become more federated with the case of being API supported across different providers and different service providers and platforms. In many cases, it is more federated than centralized. And also it's too simplified because any given system can be a mix of these. So for example, Bitcoin blockchain, which I will go into and explain more detail later, is decentralized, but the distributed apps on top of Ethereum are increasingly federated. And even Ethereum blockchain, which is different than Bitcoin blockchain, it's proposing to add a feature called sharding, which will make transactions faster. But sharding by definition is federated. So there's there's a give and take here that has to be played out. So the line that it's all decentralized, and once you listen to a lot of podcasts, people talk, decentralized becomes the buzzword that everything. It'll just make everything better if you just decentralize it, and it's more complicated than that. Censorship resistance. I won't go into this necessarily too much. Just to say that financial transactions can be done. The idea is that financial transactions can be done without any regulatory body involved, as long as you don't want to convert the crypto coins into fiat currency. And then you have to have a valid account, and you have to prove your identity for it to conform to anti-money laundering and know your customer laws that are common in most countries. And of course, creating generational wealth. Who doesn't want to create generational wealth? This is kind of the emotion and the motivation that drove the meme stocks, the GameStop and the AMC stock drive to short those stocks. And it's a way to forget the little guys to band together to stick it to those in charge. Any questions at this point? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow?
I have a question. It's Harry. The statement that decentralized is always better than centralized must have some qualifications to it. It depends what you're trying to optimize. So for example, I remember in the old days when Ethernet first came out, there was a big fat yellow cord that was supposed to loop around an organization. Everybody was supposed to put stingers into it to suck some of the Ethernet off. That was the fully decentralized. Very soon, people realized how impractical that was, and thus we started to completely invert it so that we now had closets where we had the boxes to which everybody plugged into, which is again back to centralized. So I realize that's not financial.
I'd say that makes it more federated, because now you have subnets and you have subnetworks that people are on, and then they connect to the larger network, and that's kind of how the internet is formed.
Sure.
And you have
So the question I have is, are you saying that are you talking strictly about financial systems?
Talking strictly about crypto, the crypto world. Anything that comes out, any new technology that comes out that is announced, any new decentralized financial system or a new application or new social media protocol, decentralized is the standard phrase you have to use. It has to be decentralized because that makes it better.
Yeah.
And in some ways, a lot of the distributed apps that are built on top of Ethereum is they claim, well, Ethereum's decentralized, so we're decentralized. And I'm going to go into details to show that that's not always true.
Right.
And it needs to look at the different layers and the different subsystems involved.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I certainly, trust me, I'm a huge believer in decentralized. That's my entire career. However, I've had my hands slapped at times saying, well, sometimes centralized is the only efficient way to do things, or it's much more economical to do it that way. And I always like to sort of understand where we are on that scale as to whether this is theoretical or practical.
No, then there's also different, it depends on also, there's different layers too. If you look at each of these networks, you can look at it in terms of communication, data sharing, and power, right? Who's got the power of control. And each person that you listen to, or talk to, and read about, each person behind some of these projects, it really depends. They don't necessarily define what they're talking about, whether it's data, communication, or power. And
right.
So there's an element there that you have to look at as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay,
I think we're not, I mean, the world these days, we're really not there's very few systems that are truly still centralized, at least in the web space. So we're mostly in the federated space, I'd say. So the basic tech. So every good software has a tech stack. and this will orient to the rest of our discussion. These three topologies were first identified and documented in the 1960s, right,
Yeah.
as at a network layer. For the crypto space, decentralized is seen as a way to, sorry, wrong. The government. So the one of the motivations behind the cryptocurrency push was to be outside the control and the realm of centralized government, centralized regulatory bodies, and centralized big tech, as they deem it, right? So they see them like Facebook and Google and Amazon and Twitter as big tech, and they're all centralized, right? Government centralized, regulatory bodies, finance, the big banks centralized in broad strokes. And so what they are looking at is to have a decentralized system, blockchain and everything, where you can't go in and stop, you can't control or turn it off by turning off one server. The early days of peer-to-peer file transfer and sharing, some of the systems had a coordinator server that was a centralized coordination server, but then the servers sharing the content was distributed.
Okay.
It was a direct and a very explicit part of the network and the design of cryptocurrency and the technology underlying it.
It's the weak link in the chain argument, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a central server that can be turned off, everything gets turned off. This way, it's hard to turn off Bitcoin, the blockchain.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's go into the first one. So my organization of the slides, I apologize if it's too busy. The right-hand side will clear up in a second. I just want to focus on the left-hand side. So first I start with a definition and a dependent. So blockchain at a very high level, we'll get into more detail there. At a very high level, what is the blockchain? It is public. Anybody can get access to it. It's secure. You can't change it. You have to prove your worth to be able to write to it. It's append only. They can't change anything once it's written into it and committed. It's a ledger of transactions and between users' accounts. And that is it in a nutshell. Like, you just have a transaction that takes place between two users. I want to send user A. User A wants to send user B some coins, and that's it. And the blockchain will record that in its data structures. You can also store some extra metadata on there, like a receipt or some other metadata, like we'll get into this later with the NFTs. And you can store that in with the chain, and it's called, you're storing it on chain. Strong cryptography is what helps keep it unchained. And distributed means it's decentralized. So that anybody can join the cluster if they follow certain rules and run the right software. And these nodes are all over the world. Sorry, trying to see the text. The Zoom, I'm trying to get this window. Yeah, I can move it. Sorry, couldn't see the text. So use cases. So on the right-hand side, I break down use cases for the technology, and then I talk about risks. I won't go into all of these because they'll just be me reading them. But you have a blockchain, you can create an account. Users can download a wallet and create an account for free. Transactions are easy to initiate. You can send coins to anybody. You pay a fee. The fee is variable based on volume and other conditions. Everything's public. Everyone can see what you sent to someone else, just not who you are or who the other person is. Smart contracts can be written. That's code that add cool new functionality. And the people who run the network, the nodes of the blockchain, they get paid. They get paid with native coins. It's called mining, right? They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're not buying expensive GPUs out, just with their own money without any hope of getting paid back. They get paid back, and they get paid back in coins. The mining is the process of validating each node in the blockchain. So they're essential people to get the blockchain running. And this also is a good point, like money, coins are the core, is at the heart of every blockchain operation. Other possible use cases, it doesn't have to be, the coins can be currency. but it can be anything. It could be tokens. I'll get into that in a second. It could be data, supply chain ownership records, car maintenance records, property deeds, voting people have proposed. I don't know what could go wrong. There are risks with this approach. The decisions made were for the reasons I laid out: decentralized, lack of government control, all these other things. But that means the transactions are irreversible. You send somebody coins, that's it. You have to get them to send them back to you if that was a mistake. You can't undo. Nobody else can undo. Only that person can. Coins can be sent to any wallet without permission. You can send anything to someone else. And when we get in later, we'll see that you can send an NFT to anybody. Could be a picture of their house. Hey, I know where you live. I'm anonymous. Thank you. They can be sent to inaccessible wallets. Oops, I transposed 2 digits in that address or that account. They're gone. You don't know who that person is. You can't contact them. There's a study that shows around 20% of all Bitcoins on blockchain are inaccessible. Nobody can get to them because they're lost. Lost or forgotten passwords cannot be reset. There's no central company maintaining, having customer support where you can call up and say, I forgot my password, send me a reset it for me, please. Transaction fees go up with more volume. A hacked wallet gives access to all accounts, and transactions can't be executed offline. Coins. So coins and tokens, similar. They're similar digital artifacts, and they're stored and transferred on the blockchain. Coins are native to their blockchain, like Bitcoin and Ethereum. They have their own blockchain. They're native to that blockchain, and they provide the underlying system of monetary value. And a token is similar, but it adds its value is defined by other protocols or contracts, smart contracts, let's say. So some use cases here, like there's currency. This is where all the currencies you hear about, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, Litecoin, stable coins are represented. They're that's what coins are, and they typically will have their own blockchain running. The central bank digital currency that's being discussed and proposed, and that some countries have launched, like China, are coins on top of a part of the blockchain. Coins are fungible. That means one acts like any other, like a dollar bill is like $2 bills can be interchanged. Tokens can be fungible or non-fungible. That means they're unique and that they stand alone. NFTs, non-fungible token. That's essentially what it means. It's that token is unique. There's only one of its kind. You can exchange any of these on exchanges for fiat currency, USD or whatever currency. The scarce commodity conveys perceived value, and mining transaction fees are paid out in the native coin, like I just said. The risks, so fiat value leads to speculation and volatility. Boom bust cycles happen. Pizza guy, I don't know if you've ever heard about the story. This guy bought pizzas over the summer using Bitcoin 12 years ago. Obviously those Bitcoins are now worth millions. He paid pizza for it. He got pizza for it in exchange. And smart contracts are code. They're software. They're vulnerable to bugs and security vulnerabilities, just like any other software is. And that's part of somewhere the scams and thefts have happened, is bugs in the code or weaknesses. But we'll get into that later too.
Jerry, just a quick question. Just a quick question on the previous slide. When you say that the coins can be exchanged for fiat money, where's the arbitrage come in? Who pays the arbitrage? In this case, if you're exchanging, there's always a gap between the buy and the sell price, right?
That's part though. So you go to an exchange to do that, and I think the exchange handles the arbitrage. Because
yes, the exchange does, and there are even ATMs which handle Bitcoin that are denominated in Bitcoin. You can use a card like a credit or debit card.
No, I understand that, Bob. That's fine. But
the fees arise from the exchanges.
Right, and there's always the question is, whose pocket do the fees, and the difference between the buy and the sell? Like
that's the exchange. That's the exchanges and those who have a stake in the exchanges.
Okay, so that's the fee. That's the fee for the transaction.
The fees are
Right.
non-trivial for consumers if they go to those machines. It's a lot of them are like 20% is what they scrape off. So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
not,
sure. There's a lot of money. That's why I
Yeah.
was asking what was going on here. So,
There's also an element of timing that your transaction submitted to the blockchain may not take place right away. It may take a while for it to process. And some of the things that have happened with some projects that have launched is that the spike in volume of transactions is such that people sometimes lose, the fee goes up higher than they anticipated. They pay a higher fee, but also the value of the underlying currency or whatever drops or goes up and they miss out on that. They can't control it. Yeah. The exchange, like Bob said, the exchange takes the arbitrage on that. So Bitcoin is the OG of cryptocurrencies. Maybe there was one earlier, but not really significant enough. It's used for storing value, speculative investing, and for purchases. Although so far it's limited to other digital assets like coins, tokens, and NFTs and things of that such, except if you live in El Salvador and you can use it there for purchases. I think we're seeing play out live and over the years, the volatility of the value of it compared to USD. It can lead to massive appreciation or depreciation. So if you do buy something in the real world, like Pizza Guy did, you can see that it was either good buy, you got good pizza and the value of Bitcoin dropped, or it was a bad buy. You lost out on millions because you bought pizza with it. So it is, maybe it's too soon to say, but it seems that it's a good call to say it's not resistant to inflation or other economic downward pressures that was originally speculated or promised about it. And the proof of work consensus algorithm on the Bitcoin blockchain requires pretty high electricity consumption. And that's one of the risks and the downsides of the blockchain is that to build that consensus, you have a bunch of nodes that are operated independently, but in a coordinated fashion for them to all trust. Well, trust is a big word here. In order for all these nodes to work together in a trustless environment where they don't know each other, they've got to do some pretty heavy duty cryptographic computing in order to be able to participate in the blockchain network. And that cryptographic computing requires high electricity consumption. And that's called proof of work. You're doing a lot of work doing this cryptographic calculation to be part of the blockchain. I do talk about that later and some alternatives to proof of work. Ethereum is a different coin, different blockchain. It's a different protocol entirely. And it is what is used these days for all the smart contracts to be built on. So it's also different in that it has different features at the blockchain level than the Bitcoin blockchain. I'll get into that in a second. Ethereum's protocol called ETH20 defines how to create and use smart contracts. It's the basis for all distributed apps. And it's the foundation of many, if not of many DeFi projects. DeFi stands for decentralized finance, NFTs, and DAOs. And each transaction updates an existing state machine. So that state machine is a software entity thing, and it's what adds more power and more flexibility and functionality to Ethereum's blockchain than the Bitcoin. And that's why people are using it for these additional projects on top of it. But it's still it's very, very, very volatile. The pricing, the price of Ethereum is volatile, subject to speculative investments. Same proof of work as with Bitcoin. They are working on this year. They hope to get to it this year to release a version of the consensus algorithm that's based on proof of stake, not proof of work. It'll take a lot less electricity, but it does have some risks of it may. Well, it has other risks that are being traded off. I won't get into that here. That would be beyond the scope of what this talk is about. Wallets, I want to just talk about wallets for a second, like, because they're a key part of this whole ecosystem. So they are an application you run. They can be software or hardware based, but they are a way for you to create and manage accounts on the blockchain. An account is identified by cryptographic key pair. So like in the bank account, you have an ID number, an account number, and then you have the credentials like a username and password or something to get access to that account. In the crypto world, you don't have an account number like a traditional one, but it is a cryptographic key pair, a public and a private key pair. The public key is what everyone sees. Everyone can see your public key, and with that, they can verify that what you sent them is from you. The private key is obviously by name, it's private. Only you know it, but it allows you to encrypt something, send to somebody else. They use your public key to decrypt and see it. But in transit, the contents are encrypted and no one can see it. And an account on the blockchain is essentially this private key on the blockchain. That's called an address. And you should share, if you want to send it to somebody, there's a thing called QR codes that you should use so that they don't transpose 2 digits. Like I said before, if you send any coins or tokens to somebody, you transpose their address, I won't get more, let's just say their private key. It's not that, but let's just say that's the private key. If you transpose 2 digits, it goes to someone else or somewhere in the ether, and no one can, on the blockchain, no one can get to it. The wallet's also responsible for calculating your balance across multiple accounts and blockchains. The risks are that, you forget your wallet seed phrase, you may lose everything, right? So it's not like losing a credit card, you get a new one in the mail, you lose it, you lose everything. And if you have a lot of stuff on there, NFTs, digital art, property, whatever, you lose access to that. So backups are crucial. But even there, the new accounts may be lost if you don't do backups regularly. And wallets are vulnerable, as we've seen, to phishing attacks or malicious software. And bugs or poor design can lead to lost money or lost transactions. Kind of back to that $0 balance bug I encountered with the AirFox. It's like, oh, bugs happen. We try to be as quality conscious as possible, but not everyone is. Not every group of software projects are quality conscious. So it's a risk. So this is where we're getting a little deeper. Bitcoin blockchain. So as I said before, it's different. It's its own blockchain. And on the Bitcoin blockchain, there are no accounts, there are no users or balances. Those are terms that make it easy to understand. And if you go to a website and say, what is blockchain? What is Bitcoin? You'll see these terms, but underneath the detail, they're not there. They don't exist. And that's key, because that means, that's kind of supports what I've been saying. You can't recover. You can't recover a mistyped transaction. You can't recover your seed phrase. There is no central body company that can help you with that, because at the end, there is no user or balances on here. Coins are stored at an address, a cryptographic address, and there are 2 to the 160 possible cryptographic addresses to store stuff at. And it's similar to an email address. You take the private key and hash it. So it's like an email address, but an address is balanced needs to be computed and stored off chain if you want it quickly, because each transaction has to account for all the coins to be redistributed. I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. Just suffice it to say that there's no balances, and you could end up creating multiple accounts with every transaction, because a transaction needs to account for the change left over. If you send a transaction to somebody else, it needs to account for the change. It needs to go to another address. So it can be confusing as to how many Bitcoin addresses you actually have if you use it regularly. You could have dozens of addresses, dozens of accounts that the wallet is now going to have to keep track of and sum up to give you a true account of your balance. And that's confusing, right? Like, what do you mean there's all these different accounts and these different balances? Changing wallets needs to be handled carefully because you need to make sure you transfer all the accounts, all the addresses, the ones you may not even be aware of. And so I'll go. So that's, any questions on this? No? Okay. So what have we covered so far? You know, we've covered blockchains, coins and tokens, Ethereum and Bitcoin blockchain. How are we doing for time? Doing okay. Let's see. So next I want to get into is the Web3 tech. And I've got the Ethereum blockchain here, and I talk about decentralized apps and different kind of projects. So the Ethereum blockchain, in comparison to the Bitcoin blockchain, it does have accounts and balances. It does have the concept at the blockchain level of an account and a balance associated with that account. It means that when you do a transaction, you don't create a bunch of these secondary, tertiary accounts to handle the change. It is handled in the one account. You can have multiple accounts for extra security, and I'll get into that in a second. But you can have just one account, one address from which and into all your transactions take place. And it keeps track of a balance for you. And then, like I said before, there's a state machine and a feature-rich scripting language that runs on the blockchain. And these smart contracts are what is in that code. The wallets help you support the user creating and managing multiple accounts. You have to pay a gas fee to do any transfers. Any transfer on the blockchain, any blockchain incurs fees. The fees are variable. Like I mentioned before, we were talking earlier, some people have in a high, when there's a new project that's dropping and people want to participate and try to buy something, they'll put their order in. And in some cases, and very recently, this case, I forget the project's name. People put in an order for like a $2,000 thing. I think it was land or some virtual land, and their gas fee, because of high volume, their gas fee actually ended up being $12,000, way more than the $2,000 item they were purchasing, and they had no control over that. They put it in, they didn't put a limit, and they just got socked with a $12,000 fee because of the volume. All the conditions, all the risks associated with Bitcoin blockchain apply as well, but even more, your identity. Once somebody learns your public address, your address on the Ethereum blockchain, they can look at all your transactions. So if you share with someone, here's my address, send me some money, or you share with an insurance policy, I'm going to pay you with Ethereum, I'm going to send it from this address. They can now go and look at all your other transactions. Once they have that address, they can look at all the transactions into and out of that address. And you build up this database, and as we've seen with advertisers, they can associate your online presence with your real world presence by looking at credit card transactions, credit card accounts. They can find your name and address, even if you're using cookie suppressing software. They can still associate, have a rough sense of who you are by your presence in the real world and online. Same can happen on the Ethereum blockchain. If you use one account for all your transactions, over time, they can build a database and identify who you're sending money to and who you're receiving money from. So your transactions then become a lot less private and a lot less anonymous.
What can you delineate how much how much memory might be used on a person's PC to do this versus a node that's in the network?
What's stored on your computer would just be the private keys. The blockchain is stored on separate servers. They're separate machines. They're not on your machine at all. So it's a very small amount of information that's stored. The private keys, 24 bytes, so they're very, very small amount of data that needs to be stored on your machine as part of the wallet, right?
Thank
all
you.
you do, yeah.
Hey, Jerry, can you compare the Ethereum blockchain to the Bitcoin blockchain, or now or later slide?
So this was the Bitcoin blockchain that we talked about, right? So the big things are Bitcoin doesn't have accounts or balances or smart contracts. There's a scripting language on the Bitcoin blockchain, but it's not robust and nobody really uses it as much as on Ethereum. So Bitcoin is really transactions, coins. And
okay, I wasn't clear on my question. I'm sorry.
okay, what would you like?
I was reacting to the fact that there's nothing on your local machine. My understanding
Yes.
was if you're going to play in the Bitcoin world, you need to have a fairly powerful machine because the whole blockchain gets downloaded and you have to play with that blockchain.
No,
unless you go through a third party.
Well, everyone goes to a third party now, usually. Coinbase is one such exchange. It's a custodial exchange service. It's a company. It's custodial in that it holds, you create an account with them and you buy Ethereum and Bitcoin with them and you do transactions through them. And Coinbase sends your transactions to the blockchains.
So Coinbase is just a middleman. They don't even have the full blockchain on their server.
No, they're a middle. This is what I was alluding to earlier, is that a lot of these services that people starting to use are centralizing control and data flow and stuff. And even worse, like Coinbase, if you might have seen the headlines, they recently modified one of their financial statements because the SEC told them to. They basically say, hey, if we go out of business for any reason, and we're not going out of business anytime soon, but if we go out of business and we go bankrupt, your money that we're maintaining for you, we're a custodial exchange. We have your money in us. We have your Bitcoins. You don't have the Bitcoins. We have them. If we go bankrupt, the creditors of the company are going to take your Bitcoin to pay off their debts. You won't get that. You're last in line to get your own money back. That money is probably going to go to our creditors if we go bankrupt. And that's what the custodial service is about, right? You don't actually own Bitcoin or Ethereum. You own them on Coinbase, and Coinbase owns them on the blockchain. Yeah, if you buy Bitcoin on the Coinbase and you go to the blockchain looking for it, you won't find it. It's not there.
Okay, understood.
Coinbase on, okay.
Gary.
And just to say, in the old days, if you wanted to be a miner on the blockchain and validate nodes, you'd have to have a beefy machine. But that was in the old days when you could mine Bitcoin pretty easily, because it was, as in the early days, there were a lot more Bitcoin available to be mined, and the level of work that you had to put into it was low. Over time, as the Bitcoins become more scarce in the universe of Bitcoin, the work effort to mine it gets higher and higher and higher and higher. And that's part of the proof of work algorithm. I hope that makes sense. If not,
yeah.
Gary,
Ted, do you have something quick?
Yeah. We're seeing headlines every day in the Boston Business Journal and other financial publications that these, mega Uber, Giga, or whatever scale financial entities like Fidelity and State Street are getting involved in this stuff. Where are they getting involved? Because they're obviously, dealing with trillions of real dollars.
Yeah, they're allowing you, like in the 401k space, for in your 401k, you can go and invest in a Bitcoin. I think there are some crypto and EFTs, not NFTs, crypto EFTs out there that you can invest in, and they're
Okay.
allowing you to do that.
So
I
they're
think they're
just
also-
treating it, they're just treating it as another financial asset. They're not dealing with it at the detail level that you're talking about.
Yeah,
The Chicago Board
Do
of
you know
Trade
more?
also has futures.
Mhm.
okay. So you can bet on the future of Bitcoin value. Yeah. Do you know if they include NFTs in that, Bob, or it's just the coins?
It's Bitcoin at the moment. NFT would be problematic because it's not subject to the same regulations.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, the whole point of a future is that it's on something that's fungible, and an NFT is by definition not fungible.
Exactly right.
All right. So and we're in the realm of Web3, and so smart contracts and distributed apps are kind of the same thing. Distributed apps you can expose a user interface to a smart contract, and that's a distributed app. So they're at the user level, a distributed app is like peer-to-peer applications like BitTorrent, where they talk to each other at the user level between machine and machine at that point. But then they go through a middleware layer to get access to the actual blockchain. And this is one of the criticisms that people have raised about the fact that the blockchain is it's not truly distributed, decentralized, because you can't load it on your machine. My phone, I can't load it on my phone and give me access to it. That can with code that can run effectively and efficiently on my phone. So I have to everyone has to go through middleware, through an exchange or a third party to submit transactions and to interact with the blockchain. And smart contracts are a great example of that, right? The code for the smart contract executes on the blockchain, but then you have applications built on top of that to help you manage that and to deal with that. So what are smart contracts? Their code, like I've said, that runs on the blockchain. It's predefined business logic, and it gets automatically executed when certain conditions are met, certain triggers occur. And the triggers determine which section of the code or the script gets executed. It's not like a main program that gets all run at once. There's like sections, functions that get called at different times. Once the smart contract is published to the chain, they can't be changed. It's the way the immutable blockchain works. If somebody finds a bug in the smart contract, the people managing that smart contract have to come up with a bug fix, and they have to move everyone over to that new smart contract if there's anything still left to move. Sometimes things get drained when a bug is once found. Let's see. So what are use cases for the smart contract? So you can have a trustless agreement between two parties, no need for a third party intermediary to negotiate. You say, I commit to the terms and conditions of the smart contract, and we exchange whatever, we interact, we send each other whatever we need to. Decentralized finance projects use smart contracts to define conditions and terms for lending and borrowing and swapping. Like the interest rate for lending coins or whatever to somebody else, that somebody had, and the interest rate that person has to pay, and the return, the yield. NFTs are based on smart contracts. These are the unique digital assets. They are legally recognized in several states as representing enforceable contracts. But the real question is, like, what does that mean? Is that mean that they can be held a breach in the smart contract by one party or the other? Can they be held liable in that breach? I'd say it's not yet a proven legal concept that these smart contracts are legitimately treated as contracts in the core systems. There's a lot of doubts there. For instance, I can send you a token that has a smart contract associated with it, but you get it. I just send it to your blockchain address, your account in Ethereum. You get it. You didn't sign for it. You didn't approve the acceptance of the terms of the contract. You can say, can't be held liable for this. I didn't sign it. And then what happens if I send that to someone else? Do they have to approve that they have to sign the contract and agree to the terms of the contract? There's some, I'm not a lawyer, so I only saw a video on this by a lawyer, and that just raised enough that it's not yet proven, I'd say, in the court system. NFTs, so they're cryptocurrency, they're tokens, and they're unique, and they're backed by smart contract. They represent unique, rare, indivisible digital assets, and having one in your wallet grants you special permissions based on the smart contract. So they could be in-game purchases, they could be a social media profile pics, like the Bored Ape Yacht Club. They can give you access to exclusive online communities, usually Discord or other things. They give you voting rights, governance rights on a DAO or other social communities. They represent digital art that'd be sold by the artists themselves. Excuse me. So NFTs can be, that's a lot of the hype and the promise of the NFTs. Like they're used in a lot of different areas like this. But they're highly speculative, right? The values in this, because they're scarce, because the premise that they're unique, and the only way because everything's tied to USD, a project is successful if the value of the NFT rises, and that makes it speculative. It becomes an object of speculation. High transaction fees put pressure on storing more data on the blockchain, but the blockchain is limited as how much data you can store in a transaction. You can't store an image on the blockchain. You can't store a document on the blockchain if it's too big. You can't, too big being, I think, more than 2 pages with a couple of images, I'd say. That's a guess. But it just effectively is like any content that we're talking about, music, digital art, profile pics, skins for in-game purchase, anything of size, any of the content is not stored on the blockchain. So that raises the question of where is it stored? Well, your transactions on the blockchain, and there's a bit of metadata in there that describes what you purchased and gives everyone access to an URL that you can go download that content. And for instance, there's two, for the NFTs, for the profile pics, they're usually stored on standard Web2 content servers, or a distributed system called IPFS, Interplanetary File System, I think is what it stands for. But those are public. You cannot have the only way you can do it is encrypt it, but even then it's like difficult to exchange the encryption keys unless it's part of the contract. I mean, you can do that, and then you have to decrypt anything you download from these public servers. But those public servers can go offline. Somebody has to keep paying for storage fees and the rights to that. Even things on IPFS can go dormant if nobody accesses it for a while, and it gets dropped. The content can be lost because there's no one refreshing it, so to speak. And I've heard that there's cases where you can get an NFT that's malicious. If you try to delete it, it actually gets access and it'll steal things from you. So you can end up with malicious NFTs in your wallet that you can't get rid of, and you want to get rid of, but you can't because it'll steal things from you. You end up having to make them invisible. So you can end up, you think about spam mail, you can end up with spam NFTs in your wallet that you didn't ask for. It could be links to pictures that are nasty, that are links to your house, threatening. It could be malicious code that is threatening and harassing, and you can't control it. It's showing up. The only way you can do it is by features in your wallet, blocking that and hiding that, and at the wallet level. But anybody could go out there and look at your address and say, yeah, all these things are still on the blockchain. You still own them in the eyes of the blockchain. Think about the case that someone sends you child pornography. How do you prove to the police? No, that's not mine. Someone gave it to me. See this address. I didn't ask for it. How do you prove that? I'm not sure. DAOs. So they are distributed autonomous organizations. They're blockchain-based form of organization of an organization or company that's governed by the tokens. You have different types of tokens for different voting rights. The tokens gain you the ability to vote. They give you funds back. A lot of these DAOs will distribute, will airdrop tokens to the people, and that's money. It's just a kind of pay. It's like a dividend of sorts. The smart contracts are in place of traditional corporate structures. There's examples of this: crowdfunding the purchase of a copy of the Constitution, for instance. There was a DAO that was set up just for that. I forget what the total amount of money they raised was. It was $120 million. It was a lot. They lost. They didn't get the auction, and I know that at the time they're struggling with refunding everybody's coins back. But at the time, the fees would be so high that it almost wouldn't be worth it, and so they had a lot of decisions to make. But there's a lot of community efforts out there, and a lot of Discord servers, a lot of people really bonding over shared interest. And this is a very interesting and dynamic system for governance and decision making and vision sharing and stuff like that. So, but of course, it's based on everything we just talked about. So you could talk about it's the digitization of country club networking, which people do. They'll buy an NFT, give them access to a DAO, get into a Discord server, network, socialize, whatever, drop out, sell it to someone else, and to get access to the network. Excuse me. DeFi is decentralized finance. It's blockchain-based applications that cut out the middleman from financial products and services like loans, savings, and swaps. Swapping between one coin and another. And all it takes is a smart person to create a protocol and write some code. You can go out, you can get a loan. You can say, I want to borrow 100 Bitcoin. That's a lot. So let's say 1 Bitcoin. I want to borrow 1 Bitcoin. I'll pay you a 8% interest rate. And people put their Bitcoins into the project, the DeFi project, to provide liquidity to those loans. And by staking your coins into that project to give those loans, you get guaranteed a 10% or more return rate. You'll earn interest. You just put your coins in there, you put your money in, you deposit in, and the people borrow and they pay their interest back, and you get a high return on your investment there. DAO structure, so you can vote for interest change policies. It's the credit risk models that I've heard are for blockchain-based lending. It's similar to non-crypto markets. What if a bunch of people start to default? And this was the question that I was trying to dig into. Is like, I have friends who have been talking about starting up a company in DeFi, and I'm asking them, like, what is it that people are using these loans for, right? Yeah, it's all digital loans, it's all cryptocurrency loans. I'm borrowing money, but what am I using that for? What are they using it for? That you can't buy real world things too easily with it. You could, but what I got was figured out is a lot of it points to they're investing in the speculative market of Bitcoin and Ethereum value increase. So it's I'm borrowing coins, and I'll go invest in Bitcoin and just ride the rising tide of high values as that value keeps rising. Because everything keeps rising up and to the right, everything works. But of course, the risks are that you have code running all this, and it can't be changed. It's got to be good. It's got to be good day one. You can't have a bug, $0 balance bug that like, oopsie, let's quickly fix it on the back end. Okay, it's all there. It's good. It was just a bug. No worries. It's a bug. The changing it is a big deal. Trading frenzies on top of a rate limited blockchain can lead to very high gas fees and lost trades. When there's a frenzy to buy or sell, some people put their orders in, and if the exchange can't handle it, some people lose their trade, but lose their coins as well, and they get nothing in return. A lot of the exchanges are making up for it. They're like reimburse these people who are doing this, but it can happen very easily. Let's see. Scam exchanges promise high rates of return and then impose high fees to remove your money or steal it altogether. Rug pulls are very common in this space, where people raise money and they like promote a project and then they just take the money and leave. They disappear. Yield farming projects need liquidity and need to draw in new investors to pay out existing investors. That sounds very familiar. I'll go into that later, what that really represents. What time is it? It's 11:07. Questions have slowed me down, so I'm going to skip the stablecoin page. Okay. Just the UST Terra Luna example. I'll go into that. I won't go into that now. So this is where we're at. Even more blockchain. I know you're tired of blockchain. This is where I get into the database version, like really the analysis of, is blockchain the next evolution of databases that has legs that I see beyond just the tight integration with Bitcoin. And there are three. There's something called a scalability trilemma for servers in a clustered, like a database in a clustered environment with many nodes, trying to process transactions as fast as possible, is that you can choose between two of these traits of the three to achieve, and you're gonna suffer on the third one. So you can choose decentralization and scalability, but you have less security. So one of the things a proof of work has done is that it's deliberately compute heavy to prove each node, so that each node can prove that it's a valid member of the blockchain network. And that means that in order to make that, that makes it throttled in terms of how many transactions, how many blocks it can validate, how quickly it can validate each block. So for instance, right now, the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, I believe this is for, it validates one block every 10 minutes. Now every block can contain multiple transactions, but it depends on the size of the transactions. And right now, each node chooses which set of transactions that are inbound to put as part of that block. It picks they typically will pick the transactions that have the highest fees associated. So if you want to make sure your transaction gets incorporated and gets into the block in, like, say, the next 10 minutes or the next one that's coming in 10 minutes, you pay a high fee, and you hope that the validators will pick that one, and that'll be part of the next block. If you do a low fee, it could take an hour to get your transaction through the system. And one block every 10 minutes is not good throughput in terms of speed of processing the transactions, but it's a necessary part of that whole decentralized, secure, permissionless system that is blockchain. I mentioned earlier, this might be too much, blockchain sharding. It's just adding federation to address scalability and security, but it loses decentralization as a consequence. Let's see. Attack surfaces. I haven't even talked about the cyber vulnerabilities that come with multiple attack surfaces. So one more thing about Web3 connection with this is that any Web3 changes you make that are on chain have to be paid for. So if you go to a social media site that says we're on the blockchain, your status updates are on the blockchain. That means you change your status, you pay. You update your picture, you pay. You transfer anything from one account to the other, you pay. So that means that these social media sites are going to be off the chain. So what's on the chain? Again, it's like it, you know. Anyway, I won't belabor the point. Private blockchains are not public, so they don't have to have as heavy a computation to get access to it. And it's really meant for businesses, showing the history of each asset, say, more business workflows across corporate boundaries, but you have access control that's maintained by a corporation. Okay, catching up a little bit, rushing to try to get back on schedule. So one of the things that I think is interesting is that why are there so many scams and thefts? There's, you can follow there's websites. One is called Web3. It's going great. You can follow like a trail, a timeline of all the latest scams, all the latest thefts, all the latest whatever. Dogecoin operator, the Dogecoin creator. He just tweeted this recently. The reason people think crypto is 95% scams and garbage is that most crypto people, well, are assholes, and crypto is 95% scams and garbage. Why are there so many scams and thefts in the crypto world? Because that's where the money is. It's a huge investment in crypto projects and crypto companies over the last couple of years. The VCs are throwing billions at crypto companies, and so there's no incentive not to go after them. A crypto project that has VC backing, has a flaw in their code, take advantage of it, steal things from their customers. They don't lose any money. The VCs might lose some money, but they're going for the big hits. The other thing the VCs are going for is they're going for early liquidity events. In a traditional company, they don't get a liquidity event until that company goes public, IPOs, or sold. With tokens, you could, if that company makes a big enough splash and builds the hype train high enough, early enough, the VCs can exchange their tokens on the market and get that liquidity event without having actually produced anything with the company. So they see it as a quicker way to make their money back in a world where there's a lot of speculation going on. So year to date, it's estimated there's about 2 billion in scams and thefts year to date in the crypto world. That's just this year, 2022. Focus on one recently, Seth Green's Bored Apes theft. He fell for a fake clone site. He lost 4 NFTs that he was one of them. He was developing a show on. OpenSea, which is the exchange platform for NFTs, most primary one. They stopped the sale of the NFTs. They said, we're not going to let anyone buy or sell these. So they imposed a stop on top of a blockchain, which was developed so that no central authority could do that, but they can. But Seth's publicity, because he's a famous actor, he might bring his apes home. He is meeting up with the person who bought the stolen apes and trying to work something out. But what if you're not famous or not have spent lots of money on NFTs? Would a court hear this case? What if OpenSea decides not to intercede for you? And I've had people like, my daughter's Instagram account got frozen. She doesn't know why, can't get any access, can't get anybody at Facebook to talk back. A lot of people have that. Google will stop elevating and prioritizing somebody's name in the search result because of something. There's no recourse. Same is happening here, right? Who would intercede? Would OpenSea intercede for you? And Darkwing can still sell the NFT directly without, right on the blockchain. Also, what if Seth is lying? I mean, he's probably not, but in the future, anybody could. What if somebody had seller's remorse? They stole it from me. No, I bought it from you. You sold it. Anyway, there's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns I have about this case that means that we're, it's still a long ways away from this being a standard, everyday person activity. It's kind of a bubbly system. The the same Dogecoin op creator. He said Luna 2.0 will show the world just how truly dumb crypto gamblers really are. Luna is revamping and relaunching with Luna 2.0 without the UST peg. If you don't know what that means, that's fine. I want to dig in on this quote from FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried. He co-founded FTX Exchange. I think it's the one that Tom Brady shills for. His net worth is 22 billion in the crypto world. He made it on the crypto world. He explained in Bloomberg interview or the podcast what yield farming is. And this is how he put it. People put money into the box because the bullishness of people's usage of the box. It goes to infinity and everyone makes money. Sounds like the definition of a Ponzi scheme. There's nothing being created. There's no value. It just depends on, you think it's going up. And if it goes up, then you bring in more people to pay out the people that are in there early. So he described yield farming as essentially a Ponzi scheme. Any questions before I dive into summary and conclusions? Covered a lot. I think I've blown you away, blown your brains. Sorry.
Yeah, I have
Are
a
you still there?
question. Or I have two
Oh,
questions
good.
if I could ask, Jerry.
Yep.
The first question is, how much is the government partaking in looking into cryptocurrency, blockchain, and so forth, particularly federal government? How much is regulation, so forth, coming in or being looked at? And the second question, quite separately from that, second question is the government thinking about using cryptocurrency per se as a means of transactions?
Yeah. So the first question is like they are looking at it. Biden signed an executive order a few months ago directing all the agencies to look at like how their mission and how it overlaps and what should be done. Gary Gensler, who's one of the chairs of the SEC, has said that he feels, I think he said Bitcoin and stuff, they're securities and they should be regulated as such. I think different countries are taking different approaches, and that's where everyone's a little like paying, stop and see. They're letting the innovative speculative model play out for now to see what's going on. Trying to send the message to everyday investors like, hey, this is speculative, it's not guaranteed. But I think they are seriously looking at it. They're just not sure yet what that's going to look like, what the regulation is going to look like there. They did stop Coinbase. For instance, Coinbase was working with them to say they were going to launch a loan application. They were going to start to offer loans. And Coinbase is a different kind of company. It's a real company. It's just listed on the stock exchange. It reports, it makes filings with the SEC, and they were working with the SEC to say, hey, we got this loan program we're going to do, and blah 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 blah. Finally, SEC said, no, don't do it. That puts you into a different category of company. You're not there. You don't qualify. Stop. And they were kind of pissed. See, you can go find the CEO's tweets. He was kind of like, wait a minute. Other people are doing it, and then they didn't ask for permission, but they're not being punished. So they are looking at it. As far as like, what will the government do about a digital currency? Again, there's a lot of, they are looking at it. China has launched their digital, what is their currency? Yuan? Digital yuan?
EU1.
EU1, yeah. So the government, the federal US government is looking at USDC, which is United States digital dollar. Is that it? No, that's not it. Sorry, I've forgotten what the name, what the acronym is. But they're looking at making a digital dollar. And one of the diagrams I saw is that there's a lot of private blockchains involved in a coordinated fashion, so that the minting and distribution and availability and pricing is kind of a system, like a typical central bank system, which is important because it's the dollar, and you don't want to just dump it on the open blockchain and see where it goes. but they're looking at they are looking at how to do a digital dollar in a way that you know, it protects everyday people who are still using the dollar.
Yeah, they're using blockchain technology of sorts, but they're using it in a very different way from most cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it's private blockchains, which is almost, when you talk about a private blockchain, just to let you get private blockchain, it doesn't make sense because, you know, like, well, if you take out the features that you get with a public blockchain, you can just use any database for that. And in fact, I think now it's a Oracle database that is at the heart of our financial, of the treasury. I think I've heard people talk about, like, it's all Oracle based, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why or what or how it's going to play out. I didn't. That's not part of. I just looked at it enough to see it, but I don't understand it.
Harry, given the speculative nature of the share prices or the token prices, coin prices, why would anybody other than my local drug cartel want to use this? If you looked at the distribution of investors, how many of them are just, what percentage would you guess are just speculating on the coin price versus using it as one would use an ordinary currency for business transactions?
That's a good question. I don't know how to quantify that or estimate that. And also how to define legitimate business transactions, right? So you look at an NFT, it's digital art. I'm buying artwork, right? I can buy
that. I
artwork.
did understand, right? The art I did understand, because that's a product that lends itself. But beyond that, I'm talking about your local pipe supply store. Why would they ever get involved with having their own assets in coins that could be volatile? They have to make payroll, they have to pay their mortgage, they have to do all sorts of things.
That was primary. That was one of the lessons, the kind of conclusions I draw, is that the volatility of the pricing makes it difficult to use in real world transactions, because the value can drop dramatically or skyrocket, and one side of that transaction is going to have remorse after the fact. Like, I paid pizza with Bitcoin.
Yeah, pizza's not a good example. However, in large value transactions like real estate, gems, yachts, luxury goods, there has been increasing interest in using cryptocurrency. There seem to be some advantages.
Yeah, you don't pay the sales tax.
Well, the taxes are being looked into by our governments, but they are not settled yet. So currently you can avoid some taxes.
The taxes hit when you translate it into dollars, right? And if you don't have to translate any of this into fiat currency, you're safe. There's no way anybody can track you on the blockchain. You don't know, the transactions are untraceable to you, except if you go through exchanges, and then you can be shut down, like the Russian accounts were shut down when they invaded Ukraine. So there's this like, if you go through an exchange, they can shut down your account because access to it. If you've got a custodial account with Coinbase, you wouldn't want to use that to still get around sanctions or taxes. And a lot of the oligarchs are, a lot of the people like got a lot of money from, China and Russia and other countries, went with Bitcoin because they can get by the government control. The governments have imposed control over having any of that money go out of the country. China cracked down on that too. So what the oligarchs and the CEOs and the rich people did is they converted to Bitcoin, and they got around the controls by the central government. Now, once you get outside the government, outside the country, what can you do with that? If you can't buy things in Bitcoin, you can't translate it into money because it ties back to you. Anti-money laundering laws and know your customer laws in most countries mean you have to prove your identity to exchange it into real money. What can you do with it? It's just sitting there. And it's estimated like there's high, I forget the percentage, like there's vast majority of the Bitcoin on there owned by a very small number of people. of individual addresses. So yachts, yeah, the yachts manufacturers go, yeah, come buy a yacht with Bitcoin, because that's how you want to buy it, because that's the only way we can do it. So it's still on the dark web, illicit, transfer of funds and money. That's how it's being, that's primary driver for a lot of this. But to your point is like, why would your local pipe fitter, hardware company do this? I don't see the value add there because of the speculative nature. I don't.
Gary, before the next question, Dick, did both of your questions answered?
Yes, yeah, thanks.
Great. Adam, you have your hand
Sure.
up. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Jerry, first of all, great talk. Learned a lot and very kind of balanced, I think, about the benefits and risks. Given all of that, I'm really curious what your opinion is. Like,
I'll get into that.
Is it all crap?
Oh, I'll get into that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll get into that.
Maybe
Yes,
that's
it
the
is.
right
Yes, it
segue.
is.
Let's go ahead with that.
I'll say, yeah. So let me summarize. I want to summarize to kind of pull the narrative back in. I covered a lot here, but here's the narrative I want to say. So applying game theory to the bottom layer, the tech stack monetizes the entire ecosystem. I don't see how you get around that. You add money into that layer, everything's monetized, everything's a game, right? Everything can be gamed. Speculation leads from that. Fast liquidity events leads to large investment, leads to boom bust cycles. You have that much money in there, it draws in the scammers, the thefts. The investment now, it's ironic because all that investment you think, oh, that'll help improve the tech to shore up these weaknesses, the sharding. Okay, sharding is going to add federation to the blockchain for Ethereum. How can we make it so that the risks and the flaws that can come from that are fixed? How can we make sure that maybe there's extra services we need to develop for more customer satisfaction, customer service? That's not where it's going. It's going into immediate return on investment, and because the speculative nature of things. And there's a whole several generations that are going for creating that generational wealth. That is a legitimate quote. This is generational wealth. If you raise concerns about it, you get told you're not going to make it. You didn't do the right research. You're a sucker. You're a noob. Get out of here. We're going to the moon. So there's still a lot of enthusiasm at the lower levels to keep funneling money in to the system. It makes the system unreliable for daily use. To your question about the local hardware store, I don't see how it can be used for daily, everyday, in real world use because of the volatility. And the high gas fees are unpredictable. So you don't know. It's basically every time you do you submit a transaction to be processed by the blockchain, a mini auction is held to determine whether the fee you're willing to pay is higher than everyone else who's submitting a transaction. And the nodes will pick up only the ones that are most profitable to them. So even the node, the blockchain layer, is monetizing your transaction. It's not a fair system. You've got to be able to pay more to get into and jump the queue to get your transaction processed before other people. And if you've got the money to do that, you win. If you don't, you're waiting. And it's like, like watching TV on a streaming service and you're still seeing commercials. I don't want to pay enough to get rid of the commercials, but I have to pay to get the streaming service. Anyway, the blockchain itself has to solve too many competing gnarly problems, forcing trade-offs, some worse than others. Some combination of slow performance, intense energy consumption, non-scalability, weak security, public versus private, federated blockchains, and privacy compromise. These are all very hard technical problems that everyone who has dealt with distributed databases has had to grapple with. There's no right answer. There's no silver bullet here. There's no one system solves it all. There are trade-offs. And in fact, you've got multiple blockchains. I think I get into this in the next slide. I'm talking ahead of myself. Web3 is built on all these assumptions. No separation of tech and business and financial models, none. It's all tied in. You can't optimize one tech component over another because it's all interrelated. You can't optimize, scale, and innovate separate components without compromising the whole system because it's tightly integrated. It's tightly coupled. And better tech isn't the solution to existing social networking problems. That's kind of what got us here. I'm a tech guy. I went through the whole .com boom, the Web 2.0 climb, everything. Very optimistic about tech, but it ignores a lot of human behavior. Frankly, it assumes optimism. It assumes the best behavior on everyone. Our better angels are always going to win. I think we've seen that doesn't work. So my conclusion is, it's tightly coupled, codependent, relying on code servers to function. Can't be done offline. There is a bill. I want to say there's a bill in Congress about eCash, where you can actually it's digital and it's currency, but it's just dollars, and you can transfer it offline. It doesn't go through a blockchain. I don't know anything more beyond that, so I can't go there. But back to the cryptos have captured billions of dollars in value, and it's a honeypot for scammers and whale investors, people in early to make a quick profit off of people coming in. Oh, what's this crypto? I'm putting money in. Boom, I lost it. It's that generational wealth attractions, the siren song of generational wealth, because the broader financial system's corrupted. If you saw Jon Stewart's latest show on the meme stocks, they talk about how trades are actually done on Wall Street and how Robinhood, how that works. I forget what it's called. I forget the system. But anyway, what's happening though is that they're not realizing, these people that want that generational wealth, they're not realizing that what's happening is that the crypto world is becoming corrupted by the same parties. And this is what, like Jack Dorsey said recently, it's like, you don't own Web3, you don't own it. It's not web, you don't, it's being controlled by the same VC parties and others that are in the real world. Technical underpinnings tightly coupled makes it difficult to upgrade or improve without causing vulnerabilities or weaknesses in the entire system. One of the strengths of the Web 2 architecture is an N-tier system, so you could innovate on the front end and not affect the middleware too much. You can innovate on the middleware without affecting the database or the front end. You could innovate on the database without affecting the middleware. So you had the Web 2.0 models that you could, where you needed to as a company, as a business, you could innovate and optimize and improve the performance of something that didn't rely on what you were actually, the business you were in. The thing is, blockchain has the business model baked in. It's a financial system baked in. It's not just technology. If it was just technology, things could be separated from the from financial business model of a company and improved, but it's all baked in. I don't see how, and this is partly why Ethereum is having so much trouble rolling out their proof of stake consensus algorithm. It's harder than they thought because everything is interdependent. Now, if they're successful, I think it'll be good, but there's a lot of concern there. That also can reduce fees. So a lot of the node validators may not like that. Let's see. More better tech is repeating the same mistakes by social network. So I started out saying, is this what's going to live? What's going to survive out of this? What's going to live long-term out of this? I think a lot of this stuff will, but I don't think it'll be in the same, it won't take over. It won't be Web3. It'll be a different offshoot. Web 2.0 is still going to exist. Normal ways of organizing businesses are still going to exist. Normal ways of currency and fiat currency are still going to exist. The majority of people will still use those systems. And as continuing evidence of the vulnerabilities and scams and everything else that build on the crypto world, the suckers will be drawn in, but most people who get burned or who are smarter or more observant will stay out of it. And I think it'll just be a 20%, 10% use case is what my conclusion is. Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to pull all of it into, I like doing slides because it forces me to organize my thinking and to communicate it as clearly as I can. I kept learning things right up until yesterday. I was listening to a podcast driving home from my vacation, and I'm like, oh, I need to fit that in somewhere because it was a new take on it. Looking forward to Bob's talk. You sent me the slides that you had given Bob. I didn't have a chance to read them. I'm sure that they're going to have insights in there that I hadn't seen, and it'll be very interesting to keep on top of this to see if there anything that changes this outcome, my projection.
You skipped over the stable coins. There seems to be a lot of interest on the part of quasi-governmental entities with respect to stable coins. I know there's a Sloan School project that's connected with the Boston Federal Reserve Bank. And there's Jeremy Aller has a company which is like Circle, which has a stable coin. And they're trying to
USDC.
build, they're trying to build that into the form of something akin to the original money market funds to allow for financial transactions that people don't have to worry about the value of the currency changing in the process of the time of the transaction. That seems to be a way around a lot of those issues. Now there probably are trade-offs there tied into that too, but can you say
some of
about that?
I mean, I skipped the slide, but I mean, so to your point and to explain, stable coins are tied to some they don't depend on value that people define based out of thin air. They use some sort of collateral backing for DeFi liquidity pools, and that means that like they'll use US dollars, they'll use dollars or gold or something that is something that can be exchanged for that has real value in the real world. So algorithmic stable coins, which was an example of the Terra Luna coin system, that one didn't depend on cash reserves for stability. It used a dual coin token system to stabilize the coin's external peg to the US dollar. So if the value of the coin dropped below, on the market, dropped below the price of US dollar, they had a complicated system where they would I'm gonna get the order wrong, I'm sure. They burn the token to create more coins and it would boost the value. If the value went up above $1, it did the opposite. So they had this coin token system where they would constantly shift the amount of coins or tokens in one side of the coin, if you will, than the other, to try to keep that external coin pegged to the dollar. And what happened with them is they're basically, it makes them vulnerable to a large volume transaction. There was a large volume transaction that hit Terra, and that depegged the coin down. And then because the rule was that if you bought the coin, which was the peg to the dollar, if you bought it at 95 cents, on the dollar, you can convert that to $1 worth of token automatically. And people were doing that. So the arbitragers said, oh, the peg got knocked down with this big volume transaction. Arbitragers jumped in and started buying the coin at 95 cents or whatever it was, flipping it for a token for $1 worth, and then selling that token on the market for $1 worth. So they were making 5 cents every coin they bought. And then it got into a death spiral where this kept happening. The algorithm tried to kick in and tried to restore the peg, but then panic selling hit. People was like, wait a minute, the money that's dropping, we need to sell our stuff. And in a nutshell, what I've read, that is what happened to Terra. It was a false sense of stability. And stable gains is another DeFi project, and they promised their investors they were going to put their money in US dollars as the collateral. They didn't. They dumped it in US in Luna. Luna had a lending protocol called what was their lending protocol called? I forget. It started with an A. But they had another company doing loans based on this Terra, you know, this coin token dynamic. Stablecoin said they're promising 13-14% interest. We're going to go there. I may have them. I didn't know it was 20 or 30% interest. Sorry, they're going to return me 20-30%. We're putting all our money in there, and they lost.
That sounds like Mr. Ponzi's scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm going to put in that, and then, you know, now there's class action lawsuit against stablecoins because it's like, wait a minute, you said this, but not really. I mean, I read their terms of service, and it said that, yeah, oh, initially we're going to put it into Luna, but we can do it at anything that we want. So I don't think there's a lawsuit there because they're pretty open about it. I think just if you don't read the terms of service or the protocol or whatever, you're going to get stuck with something.
No, I think ultimately, you know, any of these things, including the, you know, the fiat folding money you have in your wallet, is subject to potentially the same thing. I mean, that was the cause, to some extent, of the collapse in 2008 was when the one of the famous money market funds, I kept thinking it was the Fidelity one, but it wasn't. It was somebody else's. Got unhinged from the dollar. And, you know, you could claim you had so many shares, which used to be so many dollars, and then suddenly you weren't. And they that caused the same kind of thing that broke that loose, and that caused trillions of dollars to vanish overnight. And that caused
one thing that's
Fed to
sorry to interrupt,
create the current situation we're in.
Yeah,
but
one thing about the stable coins
just finish it real quick. I just heard Abby Johnson very recently make a statement at the Boston Chamber of Commerce session on digital commerce stuff, and she said Fidelity's hiring hundreds of people for their digital currency related stuff. Now, I don't think Fidelity would do that unless they had some sort of a deal with the government.
I don't know about that. I mean, there's a lot of money in here. So that's the thing. There's so much money. Any player, anybody's tangentially involved in finance or, you know, intricately involved in finance has to pay it serious attention. Has to look at it and say, is this the time to try to extract some value out of all this money? Try to draw some of this money off for ourselves. It doesn't mean it's just because you have more people involved doesn't mean it I don't know. That's going to be the open question. Is as more people get involved, will this eventually stabilize, or will the underlying vulnerabilities and weaknesses of blockchain doom it? I don't know. One more thing about Circle or stable coins, I want to just 1 second, is that like Circle's USDC coin is they promised an audit and they've not delivered on it for months. They give out these attestations which don't break down between liquid and illiquid reserves. So the question of like, if there's a run on the bank at Circle, like if everyone wants to get their money out, is there enough liquid reserves available for that? Or will they hit a max and go, well, we can't exchange, can't honor your request to sell out because it's all, and they haven't told anyone that. They don't do audits. They've resisted doing an audit. They have these attestations that are not the same as an audit. So just if you wanted to participate in stablecoin, look for a fully audited stablecoin to make sure that their reserves are liquid and stable. Sorry, Harry, you had a question.
Are you now, is your work now in building systems in this space or?
No, I'm consulting now with companies. I focus on the company I'm working with now for the last year has been focused on improving their agile product development practices. I work with product management, DevOps, engineering, and QA to improve how they use agile. It has nothing to do with this.
All right, just wondering.
This was just my personal project for the last several months. So
gotcha.
Jerry, just a comment and a question. To Ted's point, when Fidelity said they're announcing they're going to hire 200 people, you got to remember that those 200 people could be salespeople. They're not necessarily tech. So it is what it is. And because I'm naive and I don't understand this stuff, I'm looking at what you're talking about, stablecoin, and I'm saying, why would I even think about stablecoin? It's basically a debit card with a lot of risk.
People use the stablecoin they use it for collateral in their DeFi projects to give the perception of stability and not being vulnerable to the volatility of Bitcoin prices, right? So the stablecoin's value is pegged to USD, and that's seen as more stable, and therefore a better foundation for a loaning and lending application project than just using Bitcoin, which the volatility of Bitcoin would be too much for a lender to use. So
this sounds an awful lot like mortgages in 2008.
Yeah, and
it's supposed to. I think it's supposed to be closer to what Ned Johnson left his father. Ned Johnson left Ned Johnson Jr. or the third, or whichever it was, the old guy who just died. His father left him this thing called Fidelity Daily Income Trust, which was based on treasury bills, basically, that were deposited overnight in banks. And so you could, in fact, go to Fidelity's Daily Income Trust and not have to have your money in a bank. You would have your money in the treasury, essentially. But then the minute that they wrote it, made it available so you could write checks against it, you're right, it turned into sort of like a debit card based on the treasury. But that's equivalent. That's the same thing, basically. There's nothing, if you look at an investment in that, or today's Fidelity Cash Reserves, you read the fine print, it also says you could lose it all too, because even though it's based on these treasury obligations, the full faith and credit of the United States is not backing whatever you put into that account. So,
good.
The risk level is variable based on the vehicle, the financial vehicle you're kind of looking at. They just say that in this realm, the risk levels start out high and climb from there.
There we go. Jerry, let me just thank you. It was really wonderful.